Well, hello there. Welcome back to my channel. Today we will be discussing Frankenstein. This is a reading vlog. Yay! I'm reading this because it is the lovely month of October, and Frankenstein is a classic scare novel. Although I think this is going to end up being like Dracula, where it's not actually that scary. We've just made it scary with all of our movies and thinking. um, so I'm not expecting to get too scared, but it is a classic, so I want to have that under my belt. I know a lot of people who really vehemently hate this novel, um, and I, being the rebel that I am, want to really love this novel. So we'll have to see, because that's how I'm coming into this. Is I have a lot of really good friends, especially people in my book club, who are like, "This is a terrible book," and they're begging that we don't ever read Frankenstein. So I find that really interesting that Dracula is like super beloved, and then Frankenstein is not. I technically have read this book, but I was 13, and I'm pretty sure. I mean, I think it was abridged, maybe not. I don't know. I really don't know if it was abridged or not. But I really don't remember anything about this novel other than the fact that I can technically say that I've read it. I remember really loving it, but I don't remember anything about the book. So I don't know what I was so in love with. So this will be an interesting, it'll be a journey. Hopefully a good one. Anyway, I'll talk to you all in uno momento. Hello, welcome back. Frankenstein. We've made some progress. We made some serious progress. I went on a walk today, mostly by audiobook, I'll be honest. I haven't actually physically read anything in Frankenstein, but I'm almost halfway. I think the audiobook says I'm 30% through, but that looks a lot more like half. Okay, no, it doesn't. I lied. I'm on chapter 10, and I came into this really, really wanting to like it, and I just don't know what to think about it. I have never read a book with a narrator who is so whiny and self-absorbed. Like, Frankenstein, the creator of the monster, is in him of himself a monster, and I'm kind of hoping that Frankenstein does him in, because he is so annoying to listen to. Like, I don't know if I can think of another narrator that I have despised listening to this much. Like, it's just, he's so annoying. He is so annoying. So let's list off the grievances. So first of all, as he's telling his backstory, and he's talking about how he's doomed humankind, and like his first, like the first thing that set him on that path was that when he was looking at all of the alchemist stories, his dad was like, "Oh, those people are just dumb. They don't know anything," and he blames it all on his dad for not sitting down and talking to him and being like, there are better sciences to study right now. Like, he's like, "It was my father's fault. If he had sat me down, it would have changed the course of history." And I was like, or you could have been smart enough in college later on to realize all of that is garbage. Excuse me, not COVID, but I am sick. So he's just not aware of like blame, like whatsoever. Like, there are so many things going wrong in his life, and he's just like, yeah, that was totally my father's fault, and like that was my mother's fault for dying, and then like this professor, it's all his fault because he told me about all of these really cool things. Never mind the fact that you, Mr. Victor Frankenstein, are completely and utterly responsible for choosing to study chemistry like a maniac. And then what I don't understand is why he's such a baby about it. Like, he literally creates life, and he's like, "Oh no, it's ugly. Gasp. Must hide in terror and never speak a word to it." And I'm like, what was your plan? Like, this is just so ill-conceived. Because you spent 2 years looking at body parts, and then stealing body parts, and then piecing body parts together, and like, you very clearly saw the decomposition of the human body. Like, he talks about that, about how he saw how the body dismembers itself all the time, and he spent all that time, like, and he's talking about how he's a hero because he's willing to like go through all of that misery and work to like look at all the body parts. And I'm like, okay, but like decomposing bodies are not pretty. And like, what did you think was going to happen when you put a bunch of decomposing body parts together and sewed them? And then it's just gonna all of a sudden be beautiful? Like okay, fine. Like it's not as beautiful as you want it to be. Even if that's true, what was the plan after? Like, where is this going? Like, you're just gonna create life and then bring him into all the scientists to be like, look, guys, he's ugly. like what is the goal here? I just don't understand what the master plan is. Like, is he planning on showing this to other people? Because he like creates life and then he's just like, eek, spider, I'm gonna hide. Like, what? Like, where are we going with this? Like by all accounts, if you create life and it's ugly, then like on some level that makes it easier to study it, because then you don't feel bad about studying this life that you've created. That should have been thought number one for Mr. Scientist over here, who, I don't know, that's maybe a terrible dark thought of my own, because you shouldn't be studied in the lab just because arbitrarily people have decided that you're not as pretty and therefore not as valuable. Like, that's a dumb reason to study something, but it is a very human thing to do. Anyway, okay, so then also, did I mention spoilers? Sorry, spoilers. Okay, so he creates this monster and then he literally just runs from the house and never sees the monster again. And instead of being like, I have created something and taking any ownership whatsoever, the second he realizes the monster's gone, he's just like, cool, I'm scot-free. Just wash my hands of that and like spend some time recovering. And he talks about how miserable he is because he just didn't take care of his health and he needed to sleep and his friend had to nurse him back to health. And I'm like, yes, but also you just unleashed this monster on the world and you're taking zero ownership of it. And I therefore cannot respect you as a narrator, because you're literally just letting this thing run rampant through the streets. Like, did you not study like children who have to be taught that they need a moral compass to some extent? Like, what? Like, again, what was the plan? Like, were you like, what was the plan? And he has just no desire to prove to any of the other scientific people that, like, look, I created life. Like, I'm brilliant and I'm a genius. Like, wasn't that part of his motivation for creating Frankenstein to begin with? Like, so either this is holes in the narrative and the plot, or like Victor Frankenstein is one of the dumbest people I've ever encountered in literature. And I just despise him. But I will admit that I am enjoying this train wreck, because I am really interested to see where this goes. Which I kind of despise a little bit about myself, but like I'm interested to know where this train wreck goes. I mean, obviously it goes to a boat, because that's where we start, right? We start on the boat, finding Frankenstein riding off into the distance with his sledge and his dogs, which, I mean, that's a pretty cool way to ride off in the distance, let's be honest. And then Victor Frankenstein. Victor Frankl, who is that? Why is that name familiar to me? I think he's a pianist. Ooh. Anyway, so we find Frankenstein on the boat, and he's just talking about his tale of woe, and I'm like, if this guy makes him out to be a hero at the very end of this, I'm gonna scream. Also, I did enjoy the irony of the fact that we are reading a letter from the boatmaster, who is writing Frankenstein's biography, and in that biography we have a letter from Frankenstein's sister. So we have a letter within a letter within a letter. I was like, geez, this is turning into 1001 Nights just a little tiny bit. If we'd had another letter with inside of that, I'd have been like, this is it. But like, I mean, that was all I made it into. 1001 Nights. I made it in 4 stories, and I was like, my brain hurts. Anyway, where was I going with this? Oh yes, the worst part. So he goes home, his brother gets murdered, and he's like, I'm pretty sure that my monster that I created 6 years ago killed my younger brother. And like, first of all, it's been 6 years and he hasn't like tried to hunt down this monster. Like, are you kidding me? If I accidentally released a plague on the world, the very first thing I'd be doing is hunting that sucker down. Like, I wouldn't be able to focus or sleep until I had caught this thing. And he's just like, yes, it was days of solitude and niceness, and my poor soul just needed to rest and recover. And I'm like, bro, your poor soul? What the crap? Like, stop it. You've done nothing in your life. You're just very rich and privileged, and this hard thing has happened to you, and now you're just gonna whine about it for the rest of the book. And I'm so annoyed. Anyway, okay. And like, just to prove that point, they have a family friend, who gets blamed for the murder of his younger brother. And instead of being like, yo, I created a monster that I'm almost positive killed her, he's just like, no, it's not her. She's innocent. And then they hang her on the gallows. Like, and he doesn't do anything to try and stop that. He's like, I would just be counted as a madman. I'm like, bro, your reputation is garbage at this point. Like, you're gonna let this innocent girl be murdered because you are too much of a coward to own up to your own crap. And then his fiance is like, I just wish I could just hurt the person who has done all of these terrible things. And he's like, oh, poor me, that's me. And I had this like terrible moment where she was talking about me, but she didn't know she was talking about me, and now I feel terrible. And I'm like, yeah, and I'm sure you feel really bad. Oh, I'm a bad llama. Stop it. This is like, unless you like do some serious character changing and some serious character growth here, you might go down as one of the most despised characters in my mind. So good job to Mary Shelley for creating this terrible monster, Frankenstein. I'm at odds. I want to know how this ends, and I'm really hooked, and I didn't think I would be this hooked with this story, but I am, so I will update you when I have more information. Update number 2. We are on chapter 12. So basically what I'm here to talk about is chapter 10 and chapter 11. So at this point, he's now randomly got himself on the top of a mountain, Victor Frankenstein, which is a very gothic thing, I think, to do, to just be like, oh, I'm wandering, I'm climbing up this mountain, I'm gonna sleep here because I'm so miserable. Boom, monster. That's kind of what happens. Anyway, Frankenstein shows up and is like, you're gonna listen to me, and it's your choice as to whether I haunt you for the rest of all eternity or whether you make me happy. And you have a responsibility as my creator to like get your crap together and help me. And I'm like, go Frankenstein, way to like tell him what's what. Anyway, so okay, so now this is the best part. We now have the boatmaster who is writing this account in his journal, and we have Victor Frankenstein telling the boatmaster this story, and now we have Frankenstein telling his story we have the monster telling his story to Frankenstein, who is telling his story to the boatmaster, who's writing this all down in his journal. I love that this is so convoluted. I don't know why that gives me such pleasure. Anyway, so I've only read one chapter from Frankenstein's perspective, and it is one of the like, I don't know, it was really touching. Like I can't even imagine the idea of suddenly waking up and having full access to your senses, being a full-grown adult, and essentially being reborn and trying to figure out everything on your own. Like, this is one chapter, and it's so well written. I absolutely loved Frankenstein. He's stuck in the woods. I mean, it's a survivor aspect, let's be honest. He's just wandering, and he's trying to figure out what the heck is going on, and he's trying to like approach people, and they just keep running from him, and they're so angry, and they like throw rocks at him, and like you really just feel for the monster. And I'm so sad that he doesn't have a name. like Victor Frankenstein, he's been created for 6 years, and he doesn't call him anything but the monster in his head. And I'm just so sad that this poor guy is wandering around trying to figure out life, and he doesn't have anything. He doesn't even have a name to call himself by, and he doesn't have language, and he's hanging out now in a shed watching these people who have access to light and music, and he's just astonished, and he's trying to figure out what they're doing and what they're saying. And I mean, it's really creepy that he's just watching them, but also he has nothing else Like, there's no other form of kindness other than watching these people. It's very sad. It's very heartbreaking. And so far, it's been my favorite part of the novel, mostly because Victor Frankenstein is no longer narrating everything. And he's laying the smack down and being like, yes, you owe me all these things because this is the terrible time I had. And I don't think it's going to change Victor Frankenstein's heart. I don't think he's going to really change as a character. I'm also pretty sure that this is leading up to him saying, I would like you to make me a wife. And I can't blame him for that. That would be what I would be feeling too in that situation. I'm not sure where all of this goes, to be honest. We'll see how this goes. I'll check up with you in like 2 seconds. All right, update. I'm on page 165 of Frankenstein. He has just been acquitted of murder. I was gonna say for the second time, but we've just been through 2 murder trials. He's just been acquitted the second time. And now he and his father are headed on their way back to Geneva, Switzerland, with the intention that he's going to marry Elizabeth, finally. I'm also super still annoyed with Frankenstein because he agrees to make the monster a companion and then spends the next like month and a half just like wandering around, and he goes and lies in the lake and lies in a boat and talks about how like refreshing and nice it is and how he just doesn't feel like himself, but like woe is me. And I'm just like, bro, what are you doing? Like, you literally had a monster show up on your doorstep, threaten to kill everything that you love, and you're just like, I'll get around to it. I'm just like if a monster had showed up on my door, I would have left the next day for creation. But like, maybe that just means I'm easily manipulated. I don't know. But I'm just really annoyed by how like lackadaisical he is about this whole thing. I'm not even sure if that's the correct usage of lackadaisical, but we're gonna go with that. I've also noticed that Frankenstein, as a scientist and a human being, is just about always given a pass. Like, society just assumes the best of him. They're just on his side, the people in the novel. Like, his father and his brother and Elizabeth all spend so much time trying to comfort him, even though they themselves are like in a deep spirit of grief. They're just always seem to be coddling him in some aspect, just of like, what do you need? What can we do for you? Like, is this what you need? Because then like, let's do that. If this is not what you need, like, let's not do that. Like, everything we can do to like help and benefit you. And he doesn't really return that at all that we see. He also, like, the scientists at school, his teachers, his professors, all of them like assume the best of him. They think that like great things are coming from this man, like he's just amazing. And even though like, especially like, we just went through another murder trial and the sheriff still feels sorry for him enough that he writes to his father and is like, hey, he's really sick, he's been like charged with murder, but I really don't think he did it. Like, that's so weird. I think for a sheriff to maybe think that, I don't know, maybe that's not so weird, but like, and then we have Elizabeth, who's just over here just like, she's just waiting again just for Frankenstein, and he just assumes that she's gonna be there ready to marry him whenever like he finally decides to get around to it. And she is totally committed and devoted to him, and like, society just expects good things from him. And then on like the opposite extreme, we have the monster who shows up in society and doesn't say anything to anybody, and they start throwing rocks at him. So like, I think that's just really interesting that Victor Frankenstein in and of himself is probably more of a monster than his monster. In some aspects. Certainly the monster, he murders lots of people, so we can't just like let him off the hook. But Frankenstein just gets a pass in society, even though he himself is really not that great of a person. I think that's really interesting. I've also been thinking a lot about the fact that the monster, like, I'm wondering how much of a trustworthy narrator he is, because I know that especially when you come into social situations where you're not familiar with things, you tend to feel like awkward and uncomfortable, and things happen, and like you have a tendency to exaggerate that. Like, if people don't talk to you immediately or they just don't notice you, you might feel like, oh, like they shunned me, even though it might have just been like, I just didn't get around to talking to you. Like, you just, especially if you've grown up in such isolation like the monster did, I feel like you wouldn't you wouldn't see things the way that they actually are. And so part of me is like, is this him saying like the entire village chased after him with stones and like that's legitimately what happened, or is this him saying I walked into town and like 3 people freaked out, everybody mostly just stared and 1 person threw a rock? That is a different narrative than the entire town chased after you trying to kill you. They're both very terrible scenarios. I'm not saying they're not, but I don't know if it's a trustworthy narrative, I guess. And because this is all coming from first person, we do have to question how trustworthy our narrators are at this point. And obviously Victor Frankenstein, as the scientist, he's just very egotistical, and so we kind of like have to pull things down a grain of salt to be like, okay, this is what you said is happening, so I'm gonna like bring it back a notch. But I was thinking about the fact that we probably maybe should be doing that with Frankenstein himself, because I'm so on his side. I feel so sorry for this monster, which like nobody names. I'm so annoyed by the fact that this monster doesn't have a name. And it's ironic that in our society today we call the monster Frankenstein, even though that was the creator's name. I find that ironic and sad. Like I wish this monster had a name. Can we like vote to name him something nice? Because we can't just call him the monster. That's terrible. It's terrible. We can't just call him the monster. I also think it's interesting that Frankenstein's monster is so self-aware. Like he agonizes over how he is perceived, how everything that he does is going to be perceived by all people, versus Victor Frankenstein, who is 0% self-aware and has zero awareness of how what he's doing is going to affect society. They are polar opposites on this sliding scale here. And I don't like, do we have a middle ground? Who would be like the middle ground in the middle, who's like fairly self-aware, but then also, I don't know, maybe Henry Clerval? Oh goodness, Henry, the best friend. Maybe we would mark him in the middle as somebody who seems to be aware of how the world is perceiving him, but also could do more on the awareness side. I don't know. It's just interesting that they're like, in terms of self-awareness, Victor Frankenstein and his monster are like completely different ends. I think that's a really interesting literary choice there. I also have heard criticism on the fact that Victor Frankenstein could have just not included ovaries in the female monster, so that they wouldn't like procreate and fill the world with monsters. And at first I was like, yeah, that's weird. But then I was like, like women's health was not really a big deal to doctors until like the 1940s and 1950s. Like that just wasn't a field of study that people paid much attention to. We just kind of assumed that the human bodies were very identical, and we didn't realize that there were different health challenges faced by the different sexes. So for his time period, I don't think it's realistic to just say, just don't include the reproductive parts. I think in his mind, he would have just been like, well, this is what is involved in taking care of the body. We have to have all the things. And also is just weird that he is handling body parts all over the place. Like, I just find that really disturbing that he is just wandering around digging up body parts and never gets caught for it. I feel like somewhere, some graveyard has somebody watching and is like, bro, what are you doing? Why are you here with a shovel? Like was grave robbing, like, I know that was a thing, but like, did people get caught for that? Was there like fines for that? Like, it's a really interesting subject that I don't know anything about. And also, he sneaks into the British Isles or some island in London, near London, or near Ireland, and he takes all the body parts with him. And I'm just like, so you took all these body parts on the boat to this island. And like, at this point, they have to all be rotted, right? Like, because he's at least had them for a day and a half, and they've already been rotting in the ground. So like, was nobody bothered by the smell on the boat of these like body parts that you're just carting from one island to another island? Like, I feel like that would have been really that you would have noticed. Or is it just that the general public just really stinks because we don't have access to public showers all the time, and so like everybody just smells like death? Like what's going on here? That just didn't make any sense to me, and I found that I don't know, amusing, and also that pulled me out of the narrative a little bit. I don't know. That was interesting. I'm really interested to see where this goes. All right, last and final update because I've now finished Frankenstein. Also, crap lighting. It's fine. Okay, so we finished Frankenstein, and okay. So first off, 5 out of 5 stars. I think this is one of the best classics I've ever read. Because of all the feels. um, and I'm just trying to like sum up my thoughts. I listened to probably like 85% of this novel, and then I read the last final bit because I just wanted to be able to physically read it. So I really loved the narration, and I loved reading it. The overall experience has just been delightful. I read this in like a weekend. Like I started this on Friday, and then I finished it Monday evening, which is like really fast for a classic. And part of that was because the narration was just really accessible. Anyway, but like back to spoilery scenes. The monster definitely gets much more monstrous. Because let's see. How many people does he murder? He murders Justine. He murders his little brother. He murders his best friend Henry. He murders his wife. And then his father also dies because his cousin dies. But he's old, so that's kind of expected. It sounds like from what the novel was saying. So he murders 4 people that we know of. In like very brutal, vicious forms of revenge on our friend Frankenstein. And Frankenstein straight up loses his mind. He says he's in an insane asylum for 4 months, but he doesn't remember anything from the insane asylum. I have no idea if that's realistic or not. I thought that was really interesting. And I wish that she'd gone into that just a little bit more, because I thought that would have been interesting. But he learns nothing from that self-awareness. Like no self-awareness, no self-reflection, like nothing really changes about Victor Frankenstein. He just is hell-bent on revenge. Like his ambition strikes up all over again, because now his only ambition is to destroy the monster he created. So his first ambition was to create this monster, to create life, and then his next ambition is to destroy life, which, I mean, he's just picking a new goal. And then we move back to the boat that found him originally in the opening chapters of this story, and he's like trying to make the captain swear that he'll go after the monster, and then he's like, no, that's a lot to ask, but I'm still gonna ask you anyway. And then he dies, and like that's him. And I really don't know how long he's been chasing the monster at this point, but he's been like chasing him all over the world. They're up in the Arctic now. The monster's been taunting him and leaving him messages, which I thought was I thought that was funny, that he was just like leaving him messages carved into trees and rocks to be like, hey, here's some fish that I caught for you so you can continue chasing me. Like, there's no way you can catch me, but here's to you for trying. That was just very taunting. I enjoyed that. But up until the very end of his life, there is no self-awareness about Victor Frankenstein, or from Victor Frankenstein, because I mean, he's like, I'm not going to tell you the secret to creating life, but he blames like everything in his life because he was so ambitious about that. But also he's the one that's been choosing the last couple years to be chasing the monster down, like, and I get it, like he murdered his wife, so you know, there's definitely some bitterness that you are entitled to feel at that point, but he just made a lot of choices, and he could have stopped making those choices at any point in the novel, and he just didn't, and he's blaming everything on a choice. And like, I just don't think that's realistic to blame one thing that happens to you for all the misery that's going on in your life. It's not realistic, I don't think. So there's that. And then we do see on the opposite end, the monster come to a point of self-awareness, because he shows up pretty soon after Frankenstein has died, and he feels deep remorse for driving his creator to his destruction. Or maybe he like feels like it's his last link of humanity. He does seem to feel some link towards the boatmaster, who's like, I don't know. I thought that scene was really weird. I did have like a really big moment of hope. I was like, oh, the boatmaster who does know all of these things, he's gonna have a moment with Frankenstein's monster so that they can like talk and he can feel empathy for him. And then they just didn't. And the boatmaster seemed to be like on the same page as Victor Frankenstein, even though he'd listened to this like terrible tale of like. And then the monster leaves saying that he's like it's not worth living anymore. And I really hope, because the story ends at that point, we don't know what happens. He just jumps off the boat saying that he really wants to not be alive anymore. And I'm hoping that he gets out and he goes, you know what, Victor Frankenstein's just not worth it. Like I hope that he's in this world, he's just still wandering around, living and existing. And that he finds some blind meditative hermit in some mountain somewhere who just can't see him and is like, yeah, let's chat and be buddies. Like, you can be my hermit buddy. Like I hope like that would be the ending I would give the monster. Nirvana is what I would give him. I think Nirvana is the seventh state of heaven. I think. I can't remember. Anyway, like I also do like that this novel didn't end with a nice pretty bow in the end, because there are a lot of things and a lot of pieces that didn't end well, and the monster did do a lot of terrible murders that of innocent people, and a child and a woman, and not that makes it any different than like murdering a straight up white man, because murder is murder. So I do like that it didn't end on a nice tidy note. I just find it so fascinating, the lack of self-awareness versus awareness. Like, I think that's one of the biggest takeaways I've had from this novel, is the inability of Victor Frankenstein to see what was actually happening to him, and what his own choices were doing. Because I think that in many ways reflects kind of what we do in our own life, right? Like, I've heard it said, I'm sure I'm going to terribly misquote this, but for every finger you point away from you, there are 3 pointing back. So, nice 3 pointing back at me. Or 4? No. At least 3. I have to, like, count. There are at least 3 fingers pointing back at you. And I just wonder, like, if you could have somebody outside of your life, like, stand and watch and observe for a little bit, and then give you, like, unfiltered, authentic, honest guidance to your life, how much of that would be like, oh shoot, I am the cause of most of my problems. But maybe not. Like maybe a lot of the source of problems comes from like a lot of large scale like systematic poverty, or systematic racism, or like maybe that's like naive of me to just say like I am the cause of all my problems, because I don't think that's not true in every case. I don't know. That's just a really interesting rabbit hole to fall down. Anyway, I would highly recommend Frankenstein. I know a lot of people despise it because Victor Frankenstein is such a whiny baby. But I think that, I don't know, I think that thinking about our lives in terms of like what problems am I causing myself is a good reflection point that we should think about every once in a while, and I think that this is a good jumping off point for that. And I'm gonna wrap it up there. I will be doing a deep dive into Frankenstein next week, so I will talk to you all then and I will see you all then and talk to you in the comments down below. Bye.